Hi there, and welcome to another episode of Mr. Ed Codes. And in this episode, I wanted to do a part 2 of this game that I've been working on. It's a fan game, Star Trek. It blends Star Trek and asteroids together into kind of one game, and it's done in P5JS. As I'm recording the gameplay, my computer slows down a lot, and so it's kind of jittery. But when I have everything shut off and I'm just playing the game through the browser, it works pretty good, and it's pretty smooth unless there are tons of things on the screen. So I did a couple things to optimize the second version. You can shut the stars off. That adds a lot of processing to do the stars, so you just take those off and that speeds up the game. And a couple other optimizations that make things run faster. I can still do a couple more, but the way that it was coded originally is going to make that adaptation really hard, to the point where I have to almost start over. So maybe in the future I could address that, but right now it's not a problem so much, unless I've got lots of things going on my computer at one time. So this part addresses the 50% of any 80s arcade game is the sound. If you walked into an arcade in the 80s and listened, most adults couldn't take it. It would drive them insane. But kids loved it. The sound effects, these strange noises. When I was a kid in the 70s and 80s, weird noises weren't commonplace. I mean, you can make weird noises on your phone now, but back then, to hear a strange noise, it usually came from a movie or a TV show, and video games exploiting these weird noises was kind of a novelty. So the weirder the noises your games could make, the more attractive they were. Didn't matter what the gameplay. I mean, like Berserk. Intruder Alert was probably one of the best sound effects in video games. And even to this day, the music for Frogger or the death of Pac-Man are still sounds that are almost iconic in my brain at this point. So when I made this game, there was no sound. I'd never worked with sound in P5JS. I really didn't have any idea what I was doing. That's typical for me whenever I'm learning something, is I have no idea, but that's where you start. So I went to the resource page and just read and played around with the examples and kind of figured out what was going on, and then implemented a strategy. And so far it's working pretty well, but there are some glitches, and I think I could address this if I just created a method that handled all the sounds. Right now the sounds are just thrown in where they're needed, and it's not very thoughtful. So you have instances where there are maybe 30 sounds overlapping at the same time in the same frame. So it can cause some problems, some processing issues. So I need to handle that, but otherwise it's working pretty well. So I'm going to cut to the advanced version. I guess this is the beta version, and the next one is maybe the more playable version. I'm going to do that, and you guys can listen to the sound and tell me if it makes a difference. This is without the sound that you're seeing right here, and then next will come the sound one. During the opening screen you'll hear engine noises and then a Borg hail.
We are the Borg. Lower and surrender your ships. We will add your biological and technological distinctiveness to our own. Your culture will adapt to service us. Resistance is futile.
Of course, you got to include that iconic hail. And then one of the satisfying thing is when you start play during a hail and shoot up the Borg, it will cut them off in mid-sentence.
We are the Borg. Lower your shields and surrender your ships. We will...
Incoming transmission.
So you got the computer's voice there telling you that the Borg are hailing you, say you're going to be assimilated, and you have that nice, big, satisfying explosion sound. So what do you think? With sound, without sound? Me personally, I think it's a far more immersive experience when it has sound. when you press that button and you get that auditory feedback, and then the satisfaction of the explosion and watching your enemy fly to pieces and that reverberating noise. Really enjoy it. It's, I don't know, very meditative, I guess, in a way. So if you want, the rest of this video is going to be pretty much looking under the hood and talking about P5JS and learning how to code this program, in particular the sound. So the first thing I had to do was figure out how I wanted to do the sound. Did I want to make my own sounds, or do I just want to pull in sound files and then play those? Well, the easiest thing to do is just sound files. So I went to a website here that has all kinds of Star Trek sounds, and you can download those. I picked the ones that were pretty short because I knew that they would overlap if they lasted a long time, so I wanted them to end quickly so there'd be less instances of a lot of them overlapping. So that's what I looked for, and in one instance, the long explosion, that was the opposite, because there would only be one instance of you blowing up the Borg per sector. So that could be a long sound file, and it actually works out that better because with all the other noises, you don't get a chance to hear the explosion if it's short. So a long reverberating explosion is not only can you hear it, but it's far more satisfying. So I worked with that a little bit. I guess the point of all that is I pulled down these sounds and then I had to tweak them in order for the performance to work the way the mechanics of the game and how it calls the sounds, that had to be factored in. So it's not a matter of just grabbing what noise you like and throwing it in there. It may not work that way. You might have to adjust the code to accommodate the sound, or you can just grab a different sound and pop it in the code that's already there, which is kind of what I did. So I have different sketches that handle the different operations. So here is where all the key presses and the inputs are handled. They can get kind of convoluted. Here's the laser object. Now the problem I'm having with the laser object is that I am creating a new instance of a laser, a torpedo in this case. Every time you press the spacebar, a new instance of the laser is created. Well, imagine at the end of 18 sectors, you've fired 2,000 lasers. You've got 2,000 instances of this laser object in memory, and you're only using 10 of them at a time. So a smarter way to handle this would be to have an array, and instead of creating a new instance, you just activate or inactivate the element in that array as needed. And so in setup, you create all the lasers you expect to use throughout the entire game, which could be a maximum number on screen at any given time. In this case, it's 10. There's 10 lasers, or no, maybe it's 18. It's at the top. It'll say torpedoes active. That tells you how many torpedoes are available, and as you fire them, it drops because there's so many on screen, and it knows that. And once you have 10 on screen, it won't let you fire anymore. And then those all have to move off screen before it lets you fire again. It'll take lasers out of the array if you hit objects. So if you hit an orb, it takes a laser out. But then you create a new instance in this version. Instead, I would just inactivate that laser, and if I needed to fire another one, just activate it again, but at the ship's position, and then create the vectors that you need there. So there is a smarter way of handling the lasers so that you're not creating several instances of those. When I created the Borg ship and the parts flying apart, I did it the same way, and I immediately ran into performance issues because I'm using so many parts each sector. It's creating 200 instances of these, so you can see the numbers get big fast. So that's what I did with that. I was like, okay, instead of making new parts, I'm just going to reset a full array. So I create a full array of parts that I'm going to need throughout the game, and then I just reset those as needed at the beginning of each explosion. And the orbs, the vacuoles in this game, each sector I call a new set of orbs, and then I add a couple to it so that each sector you're getting more and more enemies to fire against. the problem with that is the same. You have all kinds of instances of these objects that aren't being used. They're just eating up memory and affecting your performance. So a smarter thing to do there would be to have a full set of orbs and then just call those along as you progress through each sector. So call the first set, call the second set, call the third set, and just add them all together. That would be a lot smarter thing to do. So there's lots of ways that this game can be optimized just by how the objects are handled. So I'm going to keep that in mind in the future, and I'm going to really avoid creating new instances of objects as needed. Instead, I'm going to create all of the instances that I need or expect to use, and then activate or inactivate those in the program. I think that'd be a lot smarter way to progress in the future, because I know that I'm going to have lots of arrays of objects, things like lasers firing and stuff like that, now that I know how to do it. In fact, right now I'm working on a clone of Missile Command. I really liked Missile Command, but I felt like it could use a little bit extra stuff. So I'm working on that now. But I'm trying to solve the problem of not creating these instance objects and not using them. So that's one of the things about P5JS I wish. I looked it up, I couldn't find it. If you guys know, if somebody happens across this video and here's my plea. How do you take objects, how do you uninstantiate objects effectively? Once you create them, are they created forever until you restart the program? I mean, these are questions that I've tried to have answered, and I ask the question and the answers I get back are all weird. So maybe if somebody can help me in the comments, that would be great. So in the sketch part, that's what I'm going through now. You saw the million global variables I had. The reason why I have so many global variables is it's just easier to keep track of a global variable name instead of trying to remember, is this an object? If it is it an arrayed object? If it is, which element is it? I mean, those extra questions that you ask for each variable is a chance to make something wrong, and then you've got to go back and find your mistake and debug it. Keeping things as simple as I could, that's what led to all these global variables, but that's going to be a performance issue, and it's also going to be an issue if you port any of this, because then you have to port those global variables. You have to know which variables go to which function, and then remember that. So down the line it can be inconvenient, but at the time right now it seemed like it was a more convenient option for me in terms of this is a first time thing for me. This is the first time I've made a game this developed before, and especially including sound. So debugging it was going to be an issue because I was in undiscovered territory, so to speak, and I wanted to keep things as simple as I could so there'd be less unknowns that I had to figure out. So if there's an error that happens, I may not know what's causing that. You may not be given enough information. But if you know everything else is pretty solid and you're confident with that, then it's easy to pinpoint where the problem is. Oh, it's probably in this part here that I wasn't so confident about when I coded it. So let's play with that and see if I can get the error to come out. That's usually how I work when it comes to coding, but it's probably not the best way to do things. That's just the way it is with me, though. I'm a hobby coder. I've learned, I was taught it in school. I went to college, I learned some rudimentary languages. The second time I went to college, I learned JavaScripting, and then just out of college on my own, I've learned P5JS over the last year. So if you're expecting these results, they may vary. With you, I have a lot of programming experience that I've built my learning P5JS on. So if you're just starting fresh out of the box, you may not get these same results. But that doesn't mean that you can't keep trying and keep working. The languages are getting easier and easier, so you can start with something that's like modular, object-oriented, and it's very graphic, user interfaced. Start with something like that, and then you can, I guess, work down to these maybe not so easy to use languages. Well, I guess that's it for this game here, this video, and this game. I think I'm pretty much done with it. If I tweak it anymore, it might just be trying to get the sounds to work better and not get so crackly and stuff after gameplay. So if anybody has any advice, please leave it in the comments. And if you've watched this long, thanks, I appreciate it. Honestly, I'm surprised. I get very few views on these videos, but I know that somebody out there is going to see this and they're going to be inspired, or it's going to reveal some insight that maybe they hadn't had before, and maybe that's going to save them a lot of aggravation and frustration, and maybe might even keep them going where they may otherwise have just given up. So that's what this is for, and it's kind of a showcase of what I've been able to do as a coder and as an artist, because I think it showcases both skills here. And that's pretty much the point of this video. So thanks again for watching. I appreciate it. Leave me a like, thumbs up, bell, subscribe, all that business. I would say follow me on social media, but I'm not really active on anything right now. So if you like these videos, they don't always come out like this. I have lots of other videos. This is basically a channel, and there's lots of programming on this channel, and this is just one part of the programming. So understand, if you subscribe, you're going to get all kinds of stuff. That being said, thanks again, and I hope to see you later. Until then, take care.